Thank you so much. Hi, thanks for coming. This is the first time you're seeing me, but it's not the last because I'm moving in. Yeah, I like it here, except I was told that I would be called, what was it, a greygler? Yeah. I don't know, that might keep me away, not sure. So this is the 43rd year since my first trip to Paris. The trip that just changed everything. I mean, from the minute I stepped foot on Paris soil, my life changed. And my relationship to my mother changed. Previous to that trip, I thought my mother was swell. I thought she was perfect. Like, one day into that trip, I realized that my perfect mother had made a tragic, tragic mistake. She had had me in Brooklyn. Right? I was meant to be born in Paris. There's no question about it. And I keep thinking about all that I missed by not being born in Paris. I mean, can you imagine how charming it would sound if I were speaking to you with a French accent? Yeah, I mean, it would be great. If I had been French, I would know how to tie a scarf. It would be like the scarf gene would be in my DNA, and I wouldn't have had to buy this. This is the How to Tie a Scarf deck of cards from Hermes, right? I also would have known the proper way to cut cheese. The French are very fussy about how cheese is cut. So, you know, a slice of brie, kind of triangular slice, cut that point off, called the nose, and you'll never be invited to anyone's home again, right? So to make sure that I still got invited, I bought this. It looks like your geometry textbook, but it's called L'art de couper le fromage, the art of cutting cheese. Yeah, I was serious about learning. I would have known the difference between boeuf bourguignon and boeuf à la mode. À la mode's one big hunk of beef, and bourguignon is just little chunks. I might even have been able, maybe, to walk in high heels on cobblestone. All the French women can. I mean, it's like, you know, they get the scarf gene and they get the high heels gene. I have none of that. But had I been born French, there's one thing I wouldn't have learned to do, and that would have been to bake. The bottom line, actually the punchline, is French people don't bake. They don't bake anything tricky. They don't bake anything complicated. They don't bake, they buy. So here's the line outside of Pierre Hermé. My favorite is this woman over here with her hand out, like, I want money for desserts. For the first 20 years or so I've been living in Paris part-time for about 20 years. And for the first, I'd say maybe 5 or 10 years that I was there, no one invited us to dinner. You have to really get to know French people to be invited. Is anybody here French? I can say anything I want. Okay. This is changing, but it really takes a long time for someone to invite you home. And so you'll meet in a cafe for a drink or for coffee, you'll go to a restaurant together, and then eventually you'll be invited to someone's home for dinner. And when you are, they will make a fabulous meal for you, and they will cap it with beautiful desserts. So you might get an éclair. So these éclairs are from a shop called L'Atelier de Génie, and the shop sells only éclairs. Or maybe a strawberry cake like this. This is from Hugo and Victor. Or the Ispahan, which is Pierre Hermé's famous cake. So it's a macaron. It's rose. The cream inside is rose. There's fresh lychee, and there's a raspberry trim, fresh raspberries. Or, do you love this? This looks like this would be perfect for Halloween, actually. Pauline, maybe you should go for this. This is a lemon tart with meringue on top. Or you would get macarons. Macarons are very, very popular in Paris. So these are from Pierre Hermé, and these are macarons from McDonald's. McDonald's has a cafe, and they have La Durée make their macaron for them. And I'm hoping when I go back, somebody is going to treat me to this. It's gorgeous. This is also a Pierre Hermé dessert. It's called Venus, and it's apple and quince, and that's all fresh apple forming the flowers on top. So I loved, of course, I mean, who wouldn't? I loved all of these very fancy, very polished pastries that I was treated to at friends' homes, and they made me feel pampered. They made me feel truly like a guest. But at some point, I started to wonder, what are my friends having for dessert when I'm not there? You know, what are they doing on a Tuesday night when the kids come home from school and have homework and mom's been working all day and dad's been working all day and they're not having this for dessert? Not only does mom not have time to go buy it, this stuff is really expensive. So this little lemon meringue tart is 20 euros, so what, about $27? This gorgeous cheesecake is only about this big, and it's 27 euro. And one little macaron from Pierre Hermé is €2.10 or something over $3. So I figured this isn't what they were doing. I already knew that they weren't whipping up complicated desserts because one night I had some Paris friends over for dinner, and I made a chocolate cake. This is not my chocolate cake, but it might as well have been because this was the style. This is my friend Betty's, and it's a recipe from Baking Chez Moi. But I brought out a cake like this, and I put it on the table, and one of my friends said, "Where'd you buy that?" And I said, "I made it." And around the table, the response was the same. Why? Why would you do something like that? That's what pastry shops are for. Right? So it was only after really years of living in Paris that I was having friends to dinner. At that point, we were being invited to friends' homes for dinner. And it was only then that I got a taste of what they were making. And I came to think of it as a parallel universe to all of those beautiful patisserie, pastry shop desserts that I showed you. Here's what my friends were serving at home and to their dearest friends. Moi, one of them. Loaf cakes. These are called, I love this, in France, anything that's shaped in a loaf pan is called a cake. And cakes like these, which are good keepers, are called either weekend cakes or gâteau voyage, travel cakes. And so even if the travel is as far as the park for a picnic, this is the kind of cake that French people will make. These are little matcha financiers. It's my version of a traditional French pastry that's really easy to make and that a French person would make at home. So financiers were created in the late 19th century in Paris. There was a pastry chef who had a shop right across from the stock exchange. And every afternoon, see, they didn't have Pauline and Charlie's, and they couldn't just go for pastries on campus. So they would cross the street, go to the pastry chef shop, and get something to eat as their treat. But they were always complaining because it took too long to eat what they bought. They needed a knife and fork, and sometimes it spotted their ties if they weren't careful. So they wanted essentially grab and go. And so the owner of the shop, his name was Lagna, I think, created the financier. It can be eaten out of hand, a couple of bites and it's finished, no crumbs, no knife, no fork. And he named it for his stockbroker clients. He called them financier. He made them originally in ingot-shaped bars, so they would kind of be familiar with that shape. I make mine in mini muffin tins, easier. And he made them as rich as his clients. There's a huge amount of butter in them. Palmier, so this is puff pastry. No French person has ever made puff pastry at home. I'm convinced of it. They go to the corner market, they buy it ready-made. So do I. They buy all their tart dough ready-made. So this is really just an arts and crafts project. You buy the puff pastry, sugar, fold it, bake it, beautiful. These are cookies. French cookies. So these were given to me by Edouard Bobin, who owns a great little bistro in Paris called Pantrouche. And he had served a little hazelnut cookie with coffee after a meal. And I said, oh, Edouard, I love these. Can you give me the recipe? He said, I'll give you a better recipe. I'll give you a recipe for cookies. I thought, I don't want your recipe for cookies. When the French say cookies, they mean only one thing: Toll House cookies, chocolate chip cookies. That to them is a cookie. And so when Edouard gave me this recipe, I looked at it and I thought, he just gave me the Toll House, the back of the Nestle's, chocolate chips bag cookie. It had the brown sugar in just about the same proportions. It had the white sugar. But these are really different. These have almond flour in them. And almond flour is so common in France that if you go to the corner convenience shop, the one that's open 24/7, you can buy almond flour in that shop. Maybe you'll get a creme caramel, this one. These are all pictures from the book, by the way. And because these are recipes from the book. A creme caramel, this one is milk chocolate. Or this was one of the recipes that surprised me the most when I discovered this. This is, I think of it as the French equivalent of Rice Krispies treats. They're called desert roses. Rose de sable, which is the name for gypsum. And they're made with cornflakes. So it's cornflakes, dried fruit, nuts, and melted chocolate. And so it's a great thing to make for kids. You can make it, put it in the refrigerator, it'll keep forever. And in fancy restaurants in Paris, they're sometimes made so that they're really tiny, and they become the after dessert. So they're, put on a platter after you've had, 2 desserts, and when coffee comes around. This is actually one of my favorite recipes in the book. So I loved these desserts that my friends were making. And I did, I was grateful to them for making them. It really made me feel like one of their family. And so you can only imagine how I felt when I asked them for the recipes and they said no. These were my friends, right? So I'd say, I love this cake. May I have the recipe? And they'd say, no, you don't want it. Too simple. It's too simple for you. You don't want it. And I'd ask, and they'd say, too simple. No, this one's not for you. So I thought maybe this was, for all the years that I've been in Paris as a faux French woman, I thought maybe I've missed this little point of etiquette. Maybe there's some ritual to this. The asker asks, the askee refuses, the asker asks again, askee refuses, the asker gets down on her knees, begs, and finally gets it. Well, finally, I did get recipes, and I realized that my friend's modesty was, I'm taking it as modesty, was actually genuine. The recipes were so simple, but they were also so perfect. So here's a recipe for a Gateau Savoie, which is one of the oldest cake recipes in the pastry canon, and this was given to me by a friend, Martine. It's normally made in a Savarin mold, so what we would think of as a Jell-O mold, just an oval ring. And I made it in a bun pan when I got back to America, thinking that it would be so much easier for us to find these pans, though I do have my mother's Jell-O pan. My mother did not bake. She did not cook. She used the oven as her bread box, but she made Jell-O. So I have her mold. I could have done this. I love this picture. So these are canestrelli. They're cookies from Corsica, and they were given to me by my friend Leticia. And they're made with olive oil, white wine, and pastis, which is an anise-flavored liqueur. And they're made totally by hand. So I love anything that you can just get your fingers in and play with. And so you start with a fork, you finish with your hands, and you can just bake them in any shape you want. And they're really great, and they're not sweet, really not sweet. So you can have them as a dessert, you can have them with fruit, or you can have them with a drink, which makes them, I think, super nice. And then this is the orange cake from Bernard's sister-in-law, Odile. Odile came to our house for dinner, and she didn't know what to bring us as it was the second time we had met her, and the first time she had come to our home, and she didn't know what to bring as a hostess gift, and she brought recipes, and I thought, that's the best gift you can give someone, right? So handwritten, beautiful, and this was one of them. And so this is a really very plain, very simple cake that gets soaked with orange syrup. And when I was testing it with my recipe tester, Mary Dodd, the wonderful, we thought, wouldn't it be fun to put oranges on top of it? And so we poached oranges. You could do oranges, grapefruits, blood oranges, tangerines. We poached the oranges and then used that syrup to soak the cake. And this is one of my favorite recipes in the book. So this is Laurent's slow-roasted spiced pineapple. Lorant is not my hairdresser. He's actually Patricia Wells's hairdresser. Isabel cuts my hair. So in Paris, there's Isabel at the hair salon. And Isabel never cooks, but she's great for restaurant recommendations. Right next to her is Lorant. Lorant cooks all the time, when he has time, which is the weekends. So after the weekend, he comes in. He's got his pictures on his phone of what he made. And so I try and make an appointment for right after the weekend so I can see what Lorant has made. And one day I came in and Lorant said, I made this pineapple for dessert. And I looked at it and it just spoke to me. And I said, how'd you make it? He said, pineapple. Cut it, right? Some jam, some orange juice, some booze, spices, whatever you've got. Just really anything you've got in the cupboard. And I said, a little bit more info, like how long? You just put it in the oven, a couple of hours, baste it now and then. I said, okay, how much jam? He said, jam. I said, how much orange juice? He said, like this. I said, how much alcohol? What kind of alcohol? Do you need to use alcohol? He said, well, rum, Armagnac, cognac, whatever you have. More orange juice if you don't want to use the alcohol. I said, how much? He said, about the same amount as the orange juice. So I went home and I made it. It was tasty, but I knew it wasn't right. So I went back and I asked Lorant. He said, I told you, like jam. He wasn't in a good mood. So the third time I asked him, I said, Lorant, I made it with like 3 or 4 tablespoons of jam. He said, no, the whole jar. You need the whole jar. I said, you didn't quite mention that. He said, you should have known. So it's the whole jar of jam and about this much orange. So I went home and I actually turned it into a recipe. But it is the kind of dessert that you can make with truly anything you've got in the house. And there's always extra syrup, and it's fabulous over ice cream. And so this is the other recipe that really surprised me. This is the Mocha DuPont. 40 years ago, when we went to Paris for the first time, we met Martine Collet. About 10 years after that, she married Bernard Collet. Well, her name was Martine. I've already forgotten her maiden name. Martine. We call her Martine. And she married Bernard Collet, and they are our best friends in Paris. We see them all the time. And for 30 years, Bernard has been telling me about his birthday cake called the Mocha DuPont. And I said, and what is it? He said, it's the cake that my mother used to make for me, and it's called DuPont because she got the recipe from Madame DuPont, who lived next door. I said, we're really good friends. I'd like to taste your birthday cake. And his wife said, you know what she said? It's not for you, it's too simple. Blah, blah, blah. I said, come on. So when I was working on this book and when I had most of the recipes put together, I said, I don't want to do this book without Bernard's birthday cake. Please tell me about it. This is an icebox cake. This is I couldn't believe it. These are Petit Beurre cookies. They can be any kind of cookie you want. They're soaked in espresso. I don't know why you would soak a cake in espresso for a 2-year-old, but c'est la vie en France. So it's espresso soaked cookies with a little espresso buttercream, and you just construct it any way you want. When I made it the first time, Bernard said, it's not right. And I said, what did I do? He said, we like to put the icing along the side of the cake. I said, okay, fine. And I did it. He said, and we like chocolate shavings on top. So I did that too. But when we did it for the book, I wanted everybody to see the pretty scalloped edges of the cookies. And so I showed him the picture in the book, and he said, that is not my birthday cake. I said, Bernard, I made it for you so that you could taste it, and you said it was good. You said it was just what you wanted. He said, yes, but it didn't look like that. He said, you have revisited it. It is relook, how do you say it? Relooké or something like relooked. I said, what bothers you? The ice cream. We never had ice cream with the cake. He's still a good friend. He's forgiven me. So because my friends had been so generous and they had given me these recipes, I wanted to create recipes for them, and I wanted to play with some of the classics in French pastry. So this is my version of a Gateau Basque. So a few years ago, Michael and I were, it's more than a few years ago because the recipe is in around my French table. We were traveling through the Pays Basque, the Basque country in France, and we passed a sign that said, Gateau Basque Museum. If there's a museum devoted to a cake, I have to go. Who wouldn't stop for this? And we went to what we thought was the museum, and we discovered that it was really a cooking class. There were just rows of like church pews, and the place was packed with people, and the chef was there with a stack of dough like this, and he made a Gateau Basque. He also did things that you're not allowed to do in America. He grabbed like a hunk of dough and said, I want you to taste this, and just passed this hunk around so that every person grabbed the hunk, right, and tasted from it. Then he passed the cream around. We all double dipped. It was tons of fun. So the traditional Gateau Basque is 2 layers of a pastry dough that has baking powder in it. So A, it means it's really forgiving. No matter what you do, it's going to bake up beautifully. And 2, the texture is somewhere between tart and cake. And in the traditional Gateau Basque, it's filled with either pastry cream or cherry jam. And if it's filled with cherry jam, you use some of the pastry to make a Basque cross over the top. So you can tell you've got a jam cake, not a cream one. So mine is filled with dried fruits, nuts, and apples. It's a great fall dessert. And these are apple croustades. So they're, again, another kind of arts and crafts project. Strips of phyllo dough, brushed with butter, sprinkled with sugar, and filled with sautéed apples. In the Périgord, the Southwest, really, this is sometimes filled with prunes, which is also nice. And I made a caramel tart, which is not really a riff on a classic, but caramel is like, you find it everywhere in France. I once said that I wouldn't be surprised if I walked into a drugstore and found caramel toothpaste. It is like the flavor of France. And so this tart is kind of an homage to French caramel. And when it's strawberry season, you see a fraisier, a strawberry cake, in just about every shop. And so this is my version of the fraisier. The layers of cake are based on a recipe for French yogurt cake. It's the only cake that every French person knows how to make by heart, right? They know the recipe by heart because they get yogurt, pour it into a bowl, clean out the yogurt container, and then that's flour. They use it for the flour, they use it for the sugar. It's like a 1, 2, 3 cake. And a yogurt cake is the birthday cake of choice in France. That's what most French mothers make for their kid's birthday. And they can make it in any shape and just stick some candles on it. It's great. So this one is made with rose flavor. So the inspiration was that Ispahan that I showed you, the rose macaron with the raspberries around it. So this is rose-flavored yogurt cake with a rose cream and the strawberries standing up like a little forest of strawberries, which is the traditional way that fraisier is done. This looks more complicated than it is to make at home. And then the bûche de Noël. So this is my Franco-American bûche de Noël. It's gingerbread, and the filling is cinnamon cream cheese. So it's the bûche de Noël, the French form with kind of American flavors. And when I was in Paris in September, it was not only Fashion Week, it was Bûche de Noël Week. And all the top pastry chefs were showing their bûches. And there was a press conference and pictures were taken. And then in November, magazines and newspapers will start showing, it's like a dream catalog. They'll show all the pictures of the bûche so you can decide what you're going to buy for Christmas. And we're there for Christmas usually, so I always buy a bûche and I make a bûche. Yeah. And some recipes I just invented, just because I was in Paris, the ingredients were there, and I wanted to. So these are granola bars, actually delicious granola bars, based on granola, and there's a recipe for my granola there that I started to make for French friends. So I started to make this granola, and I would bring it as house gifts. And people would say, oh, it's so great, I love it, I love it, I love it. And I'd say, here's the recipe. And then I'd say, did you ever make it? And they said, no, we want you to do that for you. Would you do that for us? So I stopped giving out the recipe. This is a blueberry corn cream cheese tart. So about 2 years ago, Philadelphia cream cheese became the cult ingredient in Paris. Before that time, I used to have to bring it on the plane with me. I would travel with 10 pounds of cream cheese, and I would travel with graham crackers too. Right now, they can buy it themselves. So when it was like, you would see ads for it on bus stops along and on the buses themselves. It was really like a big deal. And so I made this no-bake cream cheese filling, and I put it in a delicious French pastry tart, and then thought, I'm just going to surprise them a little bit, them being my French friends, blueberry and corn. And it turned out to be something that they truly loved. And then these little, well, I call them pielets. So they're little apple pies. They're filled with apples and raisins and spice. And I said, look, don't you love the idea of an American pie? And my French friend said, oh, you mean a tourte? A covered pie or a covered tart is called a tourte, and so the French immediately claimed this as their own. And some of the recipes in the book are recreations of things that I love in French pastry shops. So this is the Tarte Trapezium. And years ago, Pierre Hermé, I worked with Pierre Hermé. We did 2 books together, and at that time, he wasn't yet known as the Picasso of pastry or the Karl Lagerfeld of macaron. Now he's got like 1 million names, sometimes referred to as the god of pastry. So it was Pierre who said to me, have you ever tasted a Tarte Trapezium? I had no idea what it was. And he said, it's mythic. It's absolutely mythic. And as usual, he was right. So it's like a brioche. It's a yeast, very rich butter and egg dough. This is a little bit less rich than regular brioche, and it's filled with cream. And it was invented in Saint-Tropez, which is why it's called Trapezium. And the story that goes with it is that when Brigitte Bardot was filming And God Created Woman, this was her first film. Roger Vadim was the director. It was his first film. Jean-Louis Trintignant, Alain Delon. I mean, like all of these people who became great stars were in Saint-Tropez filming. And they used the caterer across the street to supply the craft table, to bring food to the set. And it was Alexandra Mika, who had come from Poland. And every day he would bring a Tarte Trapezium because the crew just loved it. And it was Brigitte Bardot who said to him, I forgot what he used to call it, but it was Bardot who said, you should call it the Tarte Trapezium. Now when you go to Saint-Tropez, every other shop is a shop that sells only Tarte Trapezium. little ones like this, big ones like this. It is like the food of Saint-Tropez, but there's only one Mica, and that's the label. When he packages, you've got Brigitte Bardot. Somebody called me the Bordeaux of baking the other day. That made me happy. This is an Alsatian Tarte Flambe, but a sweet one. And Michael, hello, Michael, that's my husband over there. Mm-hmm. Okay. We were in Alsace, in the east of France, and the Tarte Flambe is a signature, it's a specialty there. Usually made with fromage blanc, caramelized onions, and bacon. But we stopped at a restaurant called Flambe & Co. that served only Tarte Flambe and served savory and sweet. And so we each had a savory Tarte Flambe, and then we were going to have a dessert. But by that time, I had asked the server so many questions that when I said, we'd like an apple Tarte Flambe, he said to me, would you like to make it yourself? And so I got to be with the Tarte Flambe-er and watch how she made it and put it into, they had a wood-fired oven, which was fabulous. And so as soon as I came back, I started to figure out a recipe so that I could make this at home. And so can you. And this is the grapefruit tart. Remember the strawberry, the beautiful strawberry dessert that I showed you earlier from Hugo and Victor? This is a version of their grapefruit tart. So the filling is a grapefruit and Campari cream, very, very light cream. Delicious, right? With ruby grapefruits. And these are crackle-topped cream puffs. I think everyone should learn how to make cream puff dough. It's like a life skill. You learn how to drive, you learn how to make cream puff dough. It's important. These days, there are cream puff shops. The cream puffs are made on a regular, basis during the day, and then when you come in, they fill them for you on the spot. And where cream puffs used to be glazed, they now have this crackle top. It's kind of an innovation on a dessert that's got to be more than 500 years old, right? So it's a little almond cookie, and you roll the dough, the cookie dough, you roll it really, really thin, and you cut a circle, and right before you put the cream puff into the oven, you put the disc on top, and it breaks apart as the cream puff puffs. And these are cream puffs, crackle top, from a shop called Popolino. What is it called? Popolini, after the Italian pastry chef who came with Catherine de' Medici to Paris and introduced cream puffs to France. They're beautiful, aren't they? Don't they remind you of the Sprinkles cupcakes? Yeah. And these are my bubble eclair. So because it's unlikely that I'll be making eclair like I showed you before, and maybe you will, but I thought it would be fun because eclairs are so delicious, to just do something that would be super simple and everybody would be able to make them and enjoy them. And so it's cream puff dough, just scooped with an ice cream scoop or a cookie scoop, and the scoops are placed close enough together that when they bake together. And macaron. So Baking Chez Moi is my 11th cookbook. I have never put a recipe for macaron in a cookbook. I thought everyone should just buy them. I did one recipe. It was Pierre Hermé's recipe. It was in the chocolate book. I tested it. I can't remember whether it was 11 or 13 times, but it was like one of those numbers that we know is supposed to be good luck, but took me a long time to get to good luck. The recipe ran about 7 pages. This one's a long recipe too, not because it's hard, but because I was spooked by it. I was so spooked by the recipe, I took a macaron baking class in Paris. Even though I had made them before, I went to Pierre's pastry shop to watch everybody make macaron. I wanted to really get it right. And I did. And I put them in the book mostly because I realized I was being a wimp, that I was just like spooked by macaron, freaked by them, but no one else was. When I started to look around the internet, there were people posting pictures of the most gorgeous macaron and with lines that said things like, I've I've never baked before, but I thought I would try making macaron. And all of these people made such gorgeous macaron. I thought, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it. So this is the first time I've had a macaron recipe. And last month, it was now 2 months ago in September, when I was having dinner with Pierre Hermé, and he said that he was, I guess it's out now, he was just publishing his second book of only macaron. And I said, oh, Pierre, that's fabulous. And he said, yeah, but I believe people should buy them, even though this was his second book. So I usually agree with Pierre on everything, but not on this. I think you should go home and bake macaron. In fact, I think you should bake everything chez you. So thank you.
It seems that you're a little bit of an internet phenomenon. There's a Tuesdays with Dorie. There's a whole community that's built up. Would you like to say a little bit about how that started, what your relationship is with that, and
thank you for mentioning this is thank you. This is the most fabulous thing. So when Baking from My Home to Yours came out in 2006, a young woman named Lori Woodward, a young mom. Where she found time to do this, I don't know. 3 little boys. She got Baking Chez Moi for her birthday, and she liked it. She bought Baking from My Home to Yours for her birthday. She liked it, and she wrote to me, and she said, I have 2 friends who also have your book, and we like it a lot, and we'd like to bake from it every week. And we'll put a recipe up on our blogs and just, bake through your book. Is that okay with you? I thought, sure. I knew the internet was, you guys were born with it, and you actually make the internet now. But I wasn't. So for me to see people baking, I thought only my mother, the non-baker, bought my books. But, I looked on the internet, and there were people baking from my books and baking beautiful things and posting pictures. And I was so excited. That's actually why I started my blog, to be able to be in touch with all of these people. And so when Lori said she was going to do this, I thought, oh, this is just great. And I asked my editor, and she said, yeah. And my agent, sure, why not? None of us thought, what are the repercussions of having every recipe in your book available online? We just thought, oh, this was really fun. And it's only 3 people. Well, they called their group Tuesdays with Dorie, and there were only 3 people. And then there were 30, and then there were 300, and then there were thousands of people baking their way through Baking from My Home to Yours. Oprah wrote about the group. The Wall Street Journal wrote about the group. And it was so special because I didn't start it. This is really, to me, this is like the power of the internet. My husband always says it's the internet at its best. It grew organically. It wasn't me saying, gee, wouldn't it be great if I had a group? And so they baked their way through Baking from My Home to Yours, and then they started on, and they're still baking through Baking with Julia. And then when Around My French Table came out in 2010, they started a group called French Fridays with Dorie, and they're cooking their way through that. And now, on November 1st, they'll be baking every 2 weeks from Baking Chez Moi, and the other 2 weeks from Baking with Julia. And so anybody who wants to start baking with this group of fabulous, supportive, generous, adorable people, it's Tuesdays with Dorie. You have to Google it. Because I think it's like Blogspot or something, or it's got another little word in it. But if you Google Tuesdays with Dorie, the first thing you'll get is some woman named Dorie, who's not me, who has a blog called Tuesdays with Dorie. I wish she would change it. And then you'll get the Tuesdays with Dorie group, and you'll bake with them. Thank you for asking me about them. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
From husband. The thing that's really magical about that group is what Dorie started to talk about. But Lori was really brilliant. First of all, she had... The thing that's magical is that Lori was brilliant. That
Lori
would
not me,
the
right.
person who is the idea person and who is the manager of the group. it's a tribute to her that the group is very, very supportive of each other. That's really incredible. And the second thing was that it's a tribute to her that she said, oh, there's an author, and we really can't just do this without paying attention. So there was one rule that was inviolate. If you wanted to be a member of the group, you had to buy the book, which was very nice of her. And then the second rule she came up with had to do with distributing your recipes, which was the only person who could do the recipe online was the person who chose the recipe for that week. So that all the recipes were still out there, but they weren't out there in the thousands. So it just was a nice gesture on her part towards the author, which was really great.
Yeah, it's a great group. When I was, I spoke at the International Food Bloggers Conference, and about 20 people who were members of TWD and FFWD, Tuesdays with Friday and French Fridays with Dorie, came to the conference. So we actually got to meet one another, and they got to meet one another. But they'd never seen one another face to face, but they really knew one another from being part of this group. And in fact, Lori went to Seattle to be the matron of honor at the wedding of a Tuesdays with Dorie member, and they had never met. They only knew one another through baking. I just think it's fabulous.
I was a two-parter question. So the first part is, at your house when you're in France, what do you cook when you invite your French friends over? And the second part is, have you ever thought, gee, this would be wonderful, they'll really love it, and then not so much? Like, just their French taste didn't quite jive with your American taste.
Oh, wait. Okay, so that's an interesting question, and I was going to say I don't know the answer, but Michael knows the answer. Yeah. Oh, I know exactly what you're going to say. Yeah. I know. Yeah, untouched. Potato nick is not a French favorite. I cook, when my French friends come to dinner, I cook. Sometimes I cook very traditional French food. Sometimes we'll fry chicken, or we'll make hamburgers, or we'll do something very American. The French are, I was going to say adventurous, and I'm wondering now that I'm saying it, are they adventurous or forgiving? They're usually really happy to have anything that I make, and they're very appreciative. Some of them are just surprised. I mean, somebody said to me, oh, you know how to make a vinaigrette. I thought, yeah, I know how to make a vinaigrette, right. I think that there's some amount of surprise that Americans cook and eat well, that there's this idea that, I mean, we are a nation of hamburger eaters to many people outside of our country. But I cook all sorts of things, and the food that's around my French table comes from the food that I've cooked for friends around my French table. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I ever did that they didn't like. I don't think so. The potato nick was just, went over like a heavy potato pudding. Yeah.
Hi there.
Hi.
I'm headed to Paris this summer for the first time.
Lucky you.
And we are very, very excited. My boyfriend's lived there for some time, but it's my first time. And I'm curious, I've heard a lot of mixed reviews about trying to speak French with the French. What's the best way to not be hated, especially since...
Smile.
Just smile.
Just smile. All you have to do is smile. It's interesting. Sometimes if you try to speak French and your French isn't good, a French person might answer you in English if he or she can do that. And when I was younger, I used to think, how dare you? Is my French that bad that you won't listen to it? But I think they're really just being helpful. They want to make it easy for you to be able to be understood and get what you want. And if you say to a French person, oh, I want to speak French, I have to practice. Il faut pratiquer mon français. They'll speak with you. But it's interesting that when we first started to go to France, it was very hard to find people who spoke English or wanted to speak English. Now, So many people do, and they really want to. We have friends who work for French companies, but all of their meetings are in English. It's really become the language. So just smile. As long as you smile, you have a cute smile. You'll be fine.
I have a follow-up. So obviously your cookbooks are a great start for kind of seeing where you go and what shops and restaurants you like to visit. Do you have any other kind of guides to Paris
Yes.
online?
Okay, so I think you should look at a website called parisbymouth.com. Do you know it? Oh, I see a nod over there. Yeah. Yeah, it's a great site for, it's a food site. It's a great site for restaurants, for pastry shops, for bakeries. They also do tours. So I've taken the cheese tour and learned so much. It's great. They do cheese tour, they do wine tastings. Yes, it's a friend who started it. But it's a great site, and it's all in English. Yes, David Leibovitz's site is great. It's David Lebovitz, and Alexander Lobrano's site, particularly his Diner's Diary, also good. Yeah.
Well, I guess on the subject of David Leibovitz, we had him here earlier in the year,
Yeah.
and so it seems like you two know each other. Are there bake-offs or collaborations or things like that?
No. They're happy going out to eat together. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, no competition.
Awesome. And also, how do you test the recipes in your cookbook? Is there
Oh, that's a great
trusted
question.
testers?
Yeah.
And-
So all of these recipes were either gathered, begged, groveled for in Paris, or created in Paris. And then they were all tested, retested in America with American ingredients. So the two ingredients that are hardest to kind of translate from France to America are flour and butter, because the flour is weaker in France, and so in some instances I had to use less flour in a recipe, and the butter is richer in France than it is here. So all of the recipes were tested here. I worked with Mary Dodd, who was my recipe tester, and by the time I would give Mary a recipe, I had worked on it until I thought it was just right. So I didn't send her things that had holes in them. And I would send them to her fully written so that she could test the actual formula, the ingredients, and test the writing. Do the directions make sense? Because, if I've created a recipe, if I've made it several times, I can take some things for granted that, everybody needs an editor. And so it was really good that she could read them and say, do you think people will really know, and point out things like that. So she tested everything. And we tested the recipes with volume measures, cups and spoons, and also with metric measures. And I'm thrilled. I am so happy to have metric in the book. It's the first time my publisher has said yes. So I'm happy.
Very cool. Any final questions to see us on to the book signing? I guess I'll end with another one. The photos are so beautiful. Do you use the same photographer with each book? Like, how do you approach the food photography?
So the photography for my last three books, Baking From My Home to Yours, Around My French Table, and Baking Chez Moi, it's the same team. So it's Alan Richardson does the photography, Karen Tack does the food styling, Deb Donahue does the props. But Alan and Karen wrote books you might know. Hello, Cupcake. They're the cupcakers. What's New Cupcake, and so it's the same team.
Cool, great.
They're great to work with.
All right. Well, on this Google Ween, we were supremely happy to have a salute to the French baked goods. So thank you very much for speaking with us, Dorie. And
Thank you, Cliff. Thank
we'll
you
see
all
you
for
next time.
coming. Thank you.